There is a road somewhere in rural America that you cannot leave. Most people find it by accident. A wrong turn, a detour, a miscalculation on a long drive. The road pulls you in and closes behind you, and it doesn't matter which direction you go from there. The trees are always the same trees. The sky holds no landmarks. Every road out loops back to the same stretch, and at the end of it, there is a town. The town has been there a long time, long enough to develop its own rules, its own rough order, its own accumulated knowledge about how to survive what comes after dark. Certain objects, small and strange, each containing something living, protect buildings when placed correctly. Those who figured this out are alive. Those who didn't are not. Every morning the survivors count who's still there. During the day, it holds a fragile resemblance to normal life. People grow food. They build things. They argue and comfort each other and try to maintain enough routine to keep functioning, because the alternative, surrendering completely to the truth of where they are, is not something most of them can sustain for long. After dark, something comes. It looks like a person. That is the first and most important fact about what emerges from the darkness surrounding this town every night. It approaches like a person, moves like a person. Only when it gets close does something shift, something in the movement or the quality of the voice or the look behind the eyes. These creatures cannot enter a protected building. They don't need to. They wait, they circle, and sometimes they speak in the voices of people you have lost. That last detail is not an accident. It is this place's central cruelty and also its most honest quality. Whatever governs this town understands grief. It knows exactly what each person has been carrying, and it knows precisely where to press. Boyd Stevens was the first person to understand the town's rules well enough to use them. His authority comes from knowledge and continuity, not any title. He's been there longer than most. He knows how the talismans work, where to place them, which corners of town you do not go near after dark. He makes the hard calls. He keeps people alive through accumulated will, and he is, in practical terms, the reason most current residents are still breathing. Before all of this, he was a pastor, a man whose entire understanding of the world was built on the belief that suffering had purpose, that loss fit inside a larger architecture, that faith was what made individual pain survivable because it meant you were never alone inside it. Then his wife, Abby, died. The architecture fell apart. He couldn't hold the belief and the fact of her absence in the same space, so he stopped believing. He rebuilt himself into something harder, something practical, and he decided he was now the kind of man who doesn't have time for existential questions because people are depending on him right now. The town will not allow that. Every system he builds gets challenged. Every rule gets tested. What's consistent across years of watching Boyd is this: the moments where he actually accomplishes something, where something real shifts either for him or for the people around him, are almost always moments where the performance of strength breaks down, where he stops managing and starts feeling, where something real comes through. Later, something from the town's deeper mechanics gets into Boyd, changes him in ways he cannot control or explain. It strips the armor away, layer by layer. What's left is a man alone with the questions he stopped asking when Abby died. His faith. What any of this means. Whether meaning is even something this place allows. The Boyd who comes through that is more fractured, more visible, more honest in the ways that here turn out to matter most. His theological crisis is worth understanding on its own terms. Boyd didn't just lose his wife. He lost the framework through which every other loss had been made bearable. Losing faith in meaning isn't like losing one belief. It's losing the organizing system that held all the other beliefs in place. The town, methodically and without mercy, refuses to let him replace that framework with the role of leader. It keeps collapsing the role. It keeps pushing him back toward the original wound, which is not Abby's death so much as the silence that followed it, the silence where the answer was supposed to be. Jim and Tabitha Matthews came down that road on the way somewhere else. Their marriage was under strain before they arrived, and the source becomes clear without ever being announced directly. Their son, Ethan, is in a wheelchair. The way Jim moves around that fact, the overattention and the guilt visible just beneath the surface of his competence, tells you most of what happened and most of who Jim has been ever since. He is a man fixed at a specific moment he cannot go back and change, and he carries it into every room he enters. In ordinary life, there was enough forward motion to keep that fixed point from being the only thing in view. A job, a routine, enough obligation to stay in his head rather than in the wound. The town removes all of it. No job to return to. No project to absorb the energy of a man who doesn't know how to be still. Just his family and the thing between him and Tabitha that hasn't been spoken, and nowhere to redirect any of it. Tabitha opens where Jim contracts. She starts seeing things, being drawn toward the town's stranger edges, the underground tunnels, the details others walk past without registering. The more the town reveals itself to her, the more it seems to be revealing something she specifically needed to find. She goes underground. She descends into the tunnels beneath the town and discovers things that begin to reframe what this place is and how long it has been operating. The principle of it is legible before the content is fully resolved. Going toward the difficult thing rather than away from it is what earns you access to the truth. Their daughter Julie arrived on the verge of understanding who she was, and the town compressed that process into something unrecognizable. Every adolescent question about identity and belonging and who to trust gets answered at maximum intensity when survival is the daily context. Ethan, their youngest, sees things the adults miss. He reaches people the adults can't reach. Curious where the grown-ups are afraid he has a different relationship to this place than almost anyone else there. Because in a town built to reflect what you've been avoiding, a child who hasn't yet accumulated a lifetime of avoidances is differently positioned from the start. Victor has been in the town since he was a child. He watched his entire family die there. He has lived alone in this place for longer than most current residents have been alive. When you first encounter him, he seems unreachable, strange in a specific way that takes time to understand. He is what grief becomes given enough years and no outlet, no one to do the work with. Nowhere to take the weight of it. He hasn't healed. He's been surviving, which is a different thing. His interior life runs the same loop. The same memories, the same fears, the same morning after his family was gone, repeated without resolution, because resolution requires other people, and the town has taken every person he might have reached toward. Decades have moved around him while he has remained at one point, and yet he knows things. 40 years in the town is 40 years of pattern recognition. The isolation that damaged Victor is also what preserved him long enough to become the archive the other residents desperately need. His mother drew some of the symbols. That single fact reshapes the history of this place significantly. Victor's loss is wound directly into the town's origin. His trauma is not background to the larger story. It may be where the story begins. His relationship with the Matthews children is where something in him slowly starts moving again. Children approach without the expectations adults carry. They don't need him to be functional or to account for how he's lived. They simply sit with him. Victor, who hasn't been near uncomplicated human warmth in decades, begins carefully to open. The drawings he shares, the fragments of his history he gives them, are some of the quietest and most important material in this whole account. Sarah arrived already fractured. She had been hearing things for some time before she came to the town. Told things, directed towards something by a voice she couldn't explain or refuse. She nearly did something terrible to her brother Danny because of it, an act she understood as protection. The gap between the protection she intended and the harm she almost caused is where her story lives. What Sarah's experience makes plain is that this town communicates. It reaches into certain minds and sends things. The people it reaches are almost uniformly people already living at the edge of their own psychological limits. Sarah wasn't reached because she was exceptional in any flattering sense. The cracks were already there before she arrived. Something found its way in through them. The ambiguity around whether her experiences are illness or genuine perception is deliberate. In a place where the supernatural is simply operating reality, the person society has marked as an unreliable narrator of her own experience may be the one seeing most clearly. The town seems to be making that argument, quietly and persistently. Her guilt over Danny and what Danny then experiences in this place runs as a slow and sustained devastation through everything she does. She tried to protect him from something she couldn't explain, became the threat he needed protecting from, and then had nowhere to go to escape witnessing what followed. If you've been following this and want to stay with the rest of it, subscribing now keeps it coming. Back to what comes out at night. These creatures find your grief and they use it. They take the specific shape of whoever you've lost and put it in front of you in the dark. They speak in voices you recognize from a life you had before the road closed. Whatever wound you've been keeping closed is exactly where they press. Grief operates the same way. It finds the shape of what's gone and surfaces it at the worst possible moment. It uses love as the instrument of its own return. The creatures that emerge every night here are the most precise external representation of that interior process that most people will ever encounter, and this town is full of people with open wounds. The objects that protect the buildings require ongoing attention, placement, maintenance, renewal. One person who stops doing the work creates vulnerability in the spaces around them. A single person's despair can open gaps that cost others their lives. The protection holds because everyone keeps holding it, and only as long as they do. Donna runs the Colony House, one of the main communal residences, with the steady authority of someone who has made a complete peace with the permanent emergency. She has rebuilt herself entirely inside the logic of this place. Visible stability is its own form of protection for the people around her, and she understands that with precision. Her system works. The point it stops working is when grief arrives that the system cannot absorb, when loss spills past the edges of what she's built. That's not a failure of character. It's the honest limit of any structure built around management rather than feeling. Kenny lost his father in this town. His father had been one of its foundational people, which means Kenny lost not just a parent, but a model, an example of how to exist in this specific place with any coherence. What he does with that absence, how it shapes his decisions through everything that follows, runs quietly beneath the surface of his story for a long time. Now, the town calls specific people to it. That becomes clear gradually as enough arrivals accumulate that the pattern becomes visible. The road doesn't trap people at random. The people who end up here share a quality that takes time to name precisely. They are in the middle of something unfinished, something experienced but not integrated, something carried forward that hasn't been put down. Boyd, grieving his faith and his wife at the same time. Jim, fixed at the moment that changed Ethan's life. Tabitha, holding a fractured family together through will rather than honesty. Victor, frozen in childhood loss. Sarah, caught between illness and guilt and whatever the town has been asking of her. Jade, running from a history that isn't finished with him. Elgin, opened by loss in the specific way that allows this place's signal to reach him. Every single one of them was already stuck before the road closed. The figures, who appear in visions across the years, are not threatening. They don't behave like the creatures. They point. They direct certain people toward tunnels, toward symbols, toward the moments of confrontation this place has been building toward across its entire long history. Whatever they are, whether they're souls that never left, fragments of accumulated memory, or something not yet nameable, their function is consistent. They push people toward what those people have been circling rather than away from it. This place operates like a space between states, between the person you were before the defining loss and whoever you might become if you moved through it. Nobody escapes a space like that by waiting it out. The only movement available is through the thing you came here carrying. Jade approaches his situation the way certain people approach grief itself, with rational frameworks, with explanations built to let him not feel the thing directly. The town dismantles those frameworks patiently. It keeps moving the wall of what he can explain until the framework itself becomes the obstacle. His story is about what happens when the defense is built to survive a past start, to prevent navigation of the present. Elgin receives things, visions, images, transmissions from something that speaks in a language closer to feeling than to words. Another mind the town reaches, another person opened by loss in the specific way that makes contact possible. What he's being shown is still becoming clear. The pattern is legible before the content resolves. The message finds the person who's been broken open. What this place does, the specific thing it does, is eliminate every available distraction. No job to return to, no routine to hide inside, no forward motion to keep the unfinished thing at a comfortable distance. Just the people around you, the dark outside, and the version of yourself you arrived carrying. The people who remain most capable here, who read this town most accurately and make the decisions that keep others alive, are the ones who keep letting the grief land, who absorb each new loss rather than fortressing against it, the ones who go cold, who decide that feeling is a luxury the situation won't permit, start making decisions that cost other people their lives. The armor built against grief is also armor against seeing clearly. In a place where accurate perception is the margin between life and death, that is not a trade that holds. Boyd has come to understand this. Victor has understood it for decades, in the way that someone who has watched a pattern long enough arrives at a kind of knowledge that doesn't require naming. Tabitha is learning it through the underground. All of them are being moved at different speeds and from different directions toward the same confrontation, the symbols on the tree, the drawings Victor's mother left behind, the tunnels beneath the town, the visions that find the opened minds. These are not separate mysteries running in parallel. They are parts of one structure, operating according to a logic older than any current resident knew before they started looking. Boyd stood in that road because motion was the only thing keeping him from having to feel the shape of a world without Abby in it. Everything that followed stripped that option away, year by year and piece by piece, until the only thing left was the grief itself and the question of what he did when there was nothing standing between him and it, but him. After dark, something comes out of the trees. It looks like a person. And what it's looking for, what this place has always been building toward, is the thing each person arrived here carrying before they ever knew they were carrying it. If you've been watching with a different thread running through all of it, a different angle through the years, drop it in the comments. This story is built for exactly that kind of conversation.